Hey YouTube, it's me, Brandon Colonel. The next knife review that I've got is on the Kershaw Clash. Now, this is a very good knife that I would recommend to just about anybody. It works well on a budget. I got this for, I think it was around $27, tax included. It is phenomenally sharp, and just like every other knife that I've bought, it can get even sharper if you have the talent to sharpen it. Now, the only people that I would really not recommend this to are people who, especially freehand sharpeners, people who sharpen their own knives, especially freehand, but I would not recommend this to people who are scared of sharpening recurves. And also, even if they're not scared of sharpening recurves, but they haven't had experience sharpening it or don't have the tools to sharpen it. Because you definitely need a curved instrument like this, which you can easily pick this up for about $8. It's just a Smith's retractable sharpener. It's just got a telescopic diamond file. It's got a couple of different sides. It's got a groove here for stuff like fish hooks. It's got a curved section here for your recurves. And if you just want to take a portable sharpener with you to get a field sharpen on it, then it does have this flat area right here for normal knives. But so this is a phenomenal sharpener. But you definitely need something like this to get in all these little nooks and crannies. Because being a recurve, then you can't get it on a flat stone. And I mean, even how I would get it on a flat stone, I mean, get this. This is what I use to get the final touches on it. I don't know how well it'll actually show up, but I've actually done a bit of extra work on this stone right here. That's showing up a little bit better. As you can see, this side is lighter than this edge right here. That's because I've actually used my diamond file to actually grind down this edge and make it a little bit more rounded off, and also to ensure there's no cracks or chipping that's happening along this edge. So that way, what I can do is I can just encant the stone a little bit this way, make sure that it's nice and wet, and then I can just use the edge to get along the recurve. And so that's what I use to get the final polish on this knife. But otherwise, from start to finish, the only thing that I use on this are rod files. My diamond bench stone does not ever touch this knife. The flat portion of this never touches this knife. In fact, the only things that ever do touch the edge are, like I said, the rod sharpener like this, and then the varying degrees of the ceramic files. So rods are basically the only thing that will ever affect a recurve like this. Now, if you have the fixed angle sharpeners that basically already come preset with the rods, or like the ceramic rods, or even the carbides, which I don't recommend those, by the way. They wear down your edge so much faster, and it shortens the life of your knife. It basically shortens it by about making it 3 times faster before your knife is unusable, just completely unusable. So, if at all costs, avoid carbide sharpeners. They just don't work. Well, I guess I can't say they don't work, but the only way that you would want to use a carbide side for sharpening purposes is if your knife has so many cracks in the edge, it has so many nicks and dents, that just overall you won't be able to get it with just the ceramic. Which, either way, I'd still recommend using freehand. Learn how to do that, or get something like the Edge Pro Apex, or what I'm about to get soon is just the Smith's version of it. It, all in all, I'm paying a pretty decent amount of money for it, but it's going to be worth it. But invest a little bit of money into something like that if you're no good at freehand sharpening. Just to learn how to use one of those. But just so you know, all in all, the Smiths, to get everything you need, is substantially cheaper than the Edge Pro. You're paying maybe half of what the Edge Pro costs, and you can get the same mirror polish on your edge. But back to the knife itself. I've been rambling on for like 5 minutes about ways to sharpen it, but so sorry about that. But like I was saying, this knife is just beautifully sharp, and this is probably the sharpest recurve I've ever seen. Recurves usually don't get this sharp, at least in my experience. They don't seem to get that sharp. Reason being is because of how awkward the shape of the knife is. And then this part is starting to cut before this side even finishes, and just overall, it starts creating a bunch of different problems. But because of how beautifully sharp this thing is, then it kind of takes away that issue. This is just wonderfully sharp. This takes no effort whatsoever to cut. And honestly, this paper is about as thin as receipt paper. So this is really getting a good idea of just how sharp this thing really is. This thing is just absolutely like a razor, just right out of the box. And I sharpened it just a little bit more, but even though it did get sharper, it wasn't all that much sharper. So congratulations to Kershaw, you finally found basically the pinnacle of how sharp a knife can get. Because honestly, I think the only thing that I really did to this edge was I made it smoother. That was about all that I think that I really did to this knife, is I got it smoother, so therefore it could glide through the paper even better. Otherwise, I'm not even entirely sure that I really did get it sharper. But so besides that, this thing is just phenomenally sharp. I mean, just comparing it to another recurve is my ZT. On my Facebook page, if you guys watch that at all, then you guys saw that I made a post about it saying how these two knives are incredibly similar. This actually solves some of the problems that I had with this knife, while at the same time making some new ones. So, before I get into what this solved, then I'll tell you what I didn't like about this knife. For one, the tip. This tip can handle anything, but it can barely penetrate anything. I can jab this into a piece of concrete. The concrete's what's going to break. This tip is not going to budge because it is so thick on the back and it is so stout at the top that this tip is not going to budge for anything. The problem with this tip is you have to put so much extra force behind it to penetrate anything. Another thing that I didn't really care for is just the way that they've got this knife set up. It's not really designed to take that great of an edge in the first place. Like, it is pretty daggone sharp. I'll give it that much. It is very sharp. But it's not designed to carry that high quality of an edge. Well, I'm choosing the wrong words for this. But it's not really designed to make all that high of an edge. I'll just leave it at that. Now, it will get very sharp. As you can see, I'm just slicing through paper fairly easily. But just like with most every other recurve I've ever handled, it takes a little bit more skill to use this recurve properly. Recurves are more meant for tactical design. Reason being is that it can curve more with the ligaments, with your limbs, and it can curve around it without really having to curve your hand in order to get it right. This, you're basically just going down and around, and it gets the cut pretty well. So, recurves are more meant for tactical design. Whereas this one, because of just how sharp it actually is, that recurve doesn't really get in the way for me. So I could easily use this for EDC. Now, although I did use this for EDC tasks for the longest time, I didn't really have any knife that was sharper. And so therefore I didn't really have a reason to use another knife, because this blew all my other knives out of the water with just how good it was. Now that I'm getting other knives, such as this ZT right here, the 0561, go and check out the review on this one. I've got the Kershaw Skyline. This is a phenomenal cutter. Even my Kershaw Cryo, it may be about the same level of sharpness, but the fact that it's a straight edge, just a fine edge all the way through, and it's completely straight, drop point straight at least, instead of it being a recurve, then I don't have the same problems with cutting as I do with basically any recurve. This one, like I said, it's about the same sharpness level. Yeah, this is a little dull right now, so, but you can get the point. It doesn't really have all the same problems that I do with most other recurves. Yeah, it's got a bit of a nick right here, so that's what's catching on it. But yeah, so even at my Kershaw Volt 2, this is another really good knife that I can start carrying for EDC. So that way I don't really have to use this ZT as my EDC so often. But back to the Clash, I just really feel that that this is a phenomenal design for just about anything. It could easily work for tactical, which, like I was saying, was a problem with this one. The tip can handle anything, but it can't penetrate hardly anything without a massive amount of extra force. That tip is a lot more acute in every way. It's more acute on the back, which it makes it easier to penetrate in, but it also comes to a finer tip, so that way it's easier to go in the first place. You see the difference? These knives are very similar. Just the overall design is very similar. They're both pretty similar recurves. They've got similar blade stock thickness, at least towards the bottom end. They're both hollow ground recurves, liner locks. They're very similar in just about every way. But the problem with this tip is it's not quite as strong. Now, not everybody's going to be using it for tactical, not everybody's using it for pry bars. But I kind of do with my knives. I kind of use them as pry bars if necessary. So this one wouldn't exactly be able to completely handle massive prying as this one would. This one can tackle that without a problem. But so that's the problem that this is somewhat creating. But at the same time, this is almost a $30 knife. I paid $150 for this. So there's going to be cuts somewhere. No pun intended. But there's going to be cuts somewhere that are being made. But one of the things that this knife solved was the ergonomics. The ergonomics on this are phenomenal. And this one, there's a really big bump right here that can be a major hotspot while cutting, especially if you're doing hard cutting for a long period of time. This knife is going to form a really big hotspot right here, whereas this knife doesn't have that bump, or at least it's been toned down. Got the ZT in the front, Clash in the back. The way that it is has been toned down, so therefore it fits in your hand a lot better. And especially if you're even choking up for this finger cutout right here, which is another similarity between these two knives. Especially if you're choking up for a cut, then it makes it just even more comfortable. Another problem that I have with this knife is the jimping on the back is all but useless. It provides a little bit of extra traction, not much. Which I kind of got this before my callus on my thumb was completely finished up, because you've got to, if you remember in my other video about the ZT-0561, you've got to form a callus on your thumb if you really want to use this knife all that effectively, especially if you're going to be opening and closing it day in and day out, because the jimping on the frame lock, it's kind of sharp. So, but I bought this knife before the callus was completely solidified, and so the jimping was a little bit more effective at that point. Now that my callus is completely solidified, it's basically useless. Now, some people have softer hands and it might work a little bit better, but overall it's not going to do all that much. So the jimping there is pretty much effectively useless. Why they even put it there in the first place, I don't know. For crying out loud, they could even have put jimping here, and it would have made it so much better. But at the same time, the fact they have this thumb cut out here makes it kind of makes up for it. I'll give it that much. It kind of makes up for it. But some people want to have their thumbs down here, and if their thumb is slipping all the time, then you really need more. It's just not all that effective. The opening mechanism is a little stiff. You got to put a lot more force into it than I'm used to. With the cryo, it's very easy. With the Volt 2, it's very easy. But this one, the flipper's a little bit small, and you got to put more force behind it. And so it's just, that makes it a little bit more uncomfortable. And when I took this knife apart, then there was something that I was a little confused about. There are 4 washers in this, and there's 3 different types of them. There's 2 phosphor bronze washers. I think there was actually a Teflon washer in there somewhere, and there was a washer that looked like it was made out of brass. Why? That's my only question, is why? There's absolutely no need for more than 2 washers, and stick with one type. I mean, even if you're making a 4-washer system for whatever reason, why make them 3 different types? I mean, there was just no purpose for it. Actually, no, it wasn't even plastic. I think it wasn't even Teflon. I think it was just like regular plastic. And so there was just no reason for it. When I got it, this knife was incredibly gritty, and so that's why I took it apart in the first place. I mean, just opening and closing it, you could just feel and hear the grittiness. I mean, my roommate was was sitting about 10 feet away from me, he could hear it. And then there was another person I was showing this to, and he was standing about 20 feet away from me, and he could hear it. Opening the knife, he could hear it. And this does not open slowly. So the fact that he could hear it on the open, that is really gritty. And so when I took it apart, there was nothing to clean. I thought there was maybe some file shavings in the pivot. There was nothing in the pivot. And so I started cleaning off the washers. There was no grittiness on the washers. And so when I put it back together, then I'd also oiled it some. So, and that took care of some of the problem, but over the next few days it broke in, and I realized it was the washers themselves. The washers had to break in the other washers. So I think it was because there's more than just two washers in there at a time. I think that they had to grate against each other and kind of smooth the edges down a bit. So just for whatever reason, why it's there, I have no idea, because it makes no sense. And so they had to break them in. So that's something that I really don't like about it. Which, by the way, for those of you that like that flipper for a guard, as is on this one, this forms a really nice guard. You're not coming up on that too easily. This doesn't really make all that much of a guard. Dropping my knife again. You could easily overcome that. It is not even all that difficult. So just keep that in mind. Especially if you're going for some kind of penetration, it's going to be a little bit easier to overcome that. Plus, the jimping on the bottom of that kind of makes it uncomfortable, especially if you're going for a stab or something along that nature. Because the jimping on this, if you're pushing up, that's really uncomfortable, because they don't have too much jimping, but for whatever reason, the final jimp, if you will, is a lot deeper than the rest of them. So it makes this point stick out. And so pushing up, that just makes it a little uncomfortable. Now, reverse grip, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it does work. This thing was meant for forward carry. And like I said, excellent slasher. It'll work phenomenally well for penetration, but the flipper might get a little uncomfortable. By the way, it's HCR13 MOV stainless steel. Let me get out my ruler. I think this is around the 3-inch mark. Yeah, 3 inches on the dot for the blade length. It's 7 1/4 inches on the dot for overall length. The closed length is 4 1/4 inches on the dot. The handle thickness, because I was actually surprised at this. The knife is actually thicker than the ZT by just a little bit, not even all that much, but it's thicker by a little bit. Let's see. Gotta line this up properly. This is about a 1/2 inch thick. Yeah, this knife is a 1/2 inch thick. So this is going to be a bit of a brick in your pocket. Now, whenever I'm carrying this, especially if you sit down or you're doing a lot of animated movements with your legs, you're going to notice this. That's just something that I've noticed while carrying this. It's a lot more noticeable than when I'm carrying this knife. Now, although this is bigger, there's just something about it that's a slimmer profile. Which, let me measure this and tell you how thick this is. this is about one line under the half-inch mark. So whatever that means to you guys, it's one line under half-inch. But yeah, so even though this is bigger, it's slimmer in your pocket, and so therefore it's just a little less noticeable. Whereas this, somehow that one extra line over, just making it a half-inch exact, somehow makes this so much easier to notice in your pocket. The clip design is, it's a little wide, but overall it's very functional, and it allows you to get the knife out just very quickly. I really do like that. But especially for those of you that use the flared up portion. For those of you that use the flared up portion right here to kind of help you work out the knife, this is substantially flared up to the point where you can easily get a grip on that and pull it out just so much easier. One thing that I don't care for is something that I do like at the same time. I've made reference to this before, but I like the fact that it doesn't have thumb studs because it kind of cleans up the knife a little bit. And if you're making a flipper, make a flipper. Don't try to tease it into it being thumb studs, because then you're just going to tick everybody off saying, oh, this has thumb studs, but the thumb studs are just useless because they're so flush with everything. They're just useless. If you're making a knife that's a flipper, make a flipper. So the fact that they take it off ensures that nobody's going to be complaining about the fact that the flippers are just useless. No, not flippers, but that the thumb studs are just useless. But the reason why I don't like them is because then you're putting pressure on somewhere else that's not going to be quite as strong, which in this case is actually the liner. The liner is actually what catches that blade. There is no stop pin back here, which, in my opinion, this is one of the least strong blade stops that you can possibly have. Because think about it. With other knives that actually use the stop pin, such as the Kershaw Volt 2, that's got a pretty decently thick piece of steel, ensuring that this is not going anywhere. Now, sure, that can deform with repeated hits, but it's ensuring that it's not going anywhere. And plus, this is that piece is something that doesn't move, so therefore it's just going to be easier to ensure that it doesn't move in the first place. Basically, exactly what I said. Piece doesn't move, so this isn't going to move. Whereas using the liner to stop it, this is a piece that does move. So with repeated hits of it just on the opening, then it's going to be so much easier for this thing to warp. So that's really something you guys should keep in mind, because even though there's quite a few knives that do this, the majority of them that I've seen that do, typically what they do is that they're manual knives. So they're not taking all that abuse. This knife is a pretty powerful opener. It comes open with some authority to it. So just the repeated abuse that this thing is going to take, undoubtedly the liner on this thing is going to warp because of just how strong that thing opens. Now, I'm not entirely sure if Kershaw will cover that if I send it in for the warranty, but either way, this is going to warp. And it being only $27, tax included, when that day comes, I'm not going to be all that ticked, but it's definitely not going to last nearly as long as some of my other knives. So, but when that day comes, I'm probably definitely going to know it. So, but yeah, just keep that in mind. It is a really strong and sturdy blade. No blade play in any direction. Phenomenally sharp. very good EDC. It'll be an excellent tactical, just keeping in mind the jumping on here is all but useless. And also keeping in mind reverse grip works, but it's not the most comfortable thing on the planet. So just keeping all these things in mind, it would very easily work as a tactical. But yeah, just and keep the thing about the liner being the stopping device. Keep that in mind when you're buying this, because if you're buying it for long-term use, this may not really work. It's a HCR13 MOV stainless steel, which down here in Valdosta, it has rusted a little bit, because down here the air is just so much more humid that it's so much more prone to rusting. I mean, basically every single knife that I have, unless I ensure that I oil it regularly, then it's got some form of rust on it. My Skyline, I've seen rust on that. The Volt 2, I have definitely seen some rusting on this. Even my Spyderco, I've seen some rusting on this. So knives, even if they're stainless, are not immune to rusting. It really depends on the environment that you put it in. Back in my hometown, it wouldn't rust. Like, I never once oiled my knives. I never had a problem with it, because rust wasn't a problem, because the area wasn't all that humid. Down here, humidity is a major factor, and every knife that I have down here rusts. So, again, just to keep your environment in mind when you're buying this, and that you may want to pick up some oil if you're living in a humid environment. But yeah, so and by the way, this is glass-filled nylon handles. So if you're looking for a G10 knife, this is not it, despite the fact that it kind of looks like G10 to the untrained eye. Especially if you can't handle it beforehand, you may be tricked into thinking that it's a G10 model. But for those of you that really know G10, you wouldn't be fooled by it at all. But to some novice buyers, they may think that this is G10. But overall, this is a phenomenal knife, very well constructed for the most part, minus the liner and the lack of thumb studs. But which honestly, in my opinion, if you're going to make a flipper, especially with a powerful opening, you should use thumb studs on the knife to be the blade stops, because they're just so much stronger. I mean, even the Kershaw Skyline, this is not a powerful opener by any means necessary, but they still use the blade. Can't talk. They still use the thumb studs as the blade stop. Now, the thumb studs on here are all but useless. I mean, I have it. There we go. I can still get it out with them, but it takes so much more effort. These weren't meant to be used. In fact, they pointed them. They basically put a tip on these things, to the point where if I didn't have a callus on my thumb right here, that would really hurt to put that much pressure on it so I could open it by the thumb stud. Because right now my thumb is all but deadened into pain because of how thick of a callus I've got on this thing. So this is designed to be a flipper through and through, and even though this thing opens pretty sluggishly as far as flippers go, they still use the thumb studs as a blade stop. They could do that on this easily. And like I said, sure, people are probably going to complain saying, oh, the thumb studs are useless. Just have Kershaw come out with a statement saying, these thumb studs are not meant to be used. don't try to use them. They're not going to work. In fact, make them completely flush with both sides of the handle, so that way people can't use them. I mean, just like on my CRKT M16-02Z. I don't have that one on me, so I can't really show you. Go and look at my review of that. They're completely flush, so that way you basically can't use them. If you are dedicated to using thumb studs, it is possible, but it's not likely that it's going to work very easily. You're going to spend a lot more time using the thumb studs than you are the flipper, which the flipper just works so much better. I'll just put that out there. It works better. Just like this. This is very easy to do that. But the fact of thumb studs being here would make it a lot more solid. This is a reversible pocket clip, so you can carry it tip down or you can carry it tip up, which is what I have it for, although it is not left-right reversible. They do not have extra holes drilled out on this side. But honestly, I think they should put that option on there, because that way it gives them more of an option to sell other knives to people. Because there's more people that are left-handed out there than anybody realizes, and forcing somebody to carry a knife right-handed when they're left-handed, it's a little awkward. But honestly, in my opinion, even making those extra holes drilled out, it's still pretty awkward for somebody to close the knife one-handed, because then you got to find out some way to twist the knife around and maybe like do it against your jeans or something, and just closing it like that. But it's just it's so much more work to do that. And which is something that CRKT has actually thought of. They've made a knife specifically for left-handed users, so that way they can open the knife left-handed, they can close the knife easily one-handed, just the same as I would right now. They can close it the exact same way, only left-handed. They push the knife this way, and so they can close the same way that I would right-handed. So, congratulations, CRKT. Kershaw, pick up on that. That's about all that I've really got to say about this. So, yeah, that's it. As usual, stay safe.